And that's why, and that confirmed the jet fuel smell that we were talking about when we first spoke live on the air. And that would tell you why there's so much jet fuel, because they had just taken off probably with a load of fuel. No word on where it was headed to, but it was just taking off from Northeast Philadelphia Airport. And the picture of the plane that a source provided had like at least 6 windows on the side. So this was not a very small one, but what we commonly call as Lear jets, executive jets that would take off. So I'm walking further down the Roosevelt Mall out of the smoke line. Where are you guys moving up at? Well, I'm the opposite way. They said the Boulevard, and thank you. They said that way, because they just chased me this way. But go over that way. All right, thank you. Yes.
All right, Steve obviously having to do some navigating here with police who are asking him to move for his own safety. So he's trying to do that and try to get to a safe place while giving us a little play-by-play of what he's seeing. On the left is video Steve took about 5 to 10 minutes ago of a twirling fire being fueled by an underground gas line in the parking lot of a Roosevelt Mall. And on the right is a live picture on a rainy night here in Northeast Philly of the response from firefighters, hundreds if not more, dozens there, trying to really just get a handle on what has happened with this, what appears to be what Steve described as a Learjet, a private type jet with twin engines, about 6 windows that may have crashed, and that happened about an hour and 15 minutes ago. This obviously kind of a chaotic scene here as police and firefighters have yet to give us an update on what's going on. We're doing our best to try to bring you what we know and what we've seen.
Right, and police telling a top police source telling Steve Keeley that this was a plane that was carrying 2 pilots, 2 doctors, a patient, and a family member. So this sounds like it was some kind of medical transport situation. 6 people on that plane. Steve describing it as larger than usual. It was not a small plane, obviously involved in some kind of medical transport, according to top Philadelphia law enforcement officials. And just to see the fire, cars on fire, and this chaotic scene, Steve obviously moving about, trying to bring us the latest details while also trying to stay safe himself, talking about just how hard it is to breathe and the smoke in the air. And then we have all these EMT and EMS workers on the scene also trying to make the situation as safe as it can be for people there on the scene.
Yeah, and that's the first I'm hearing about a medical flight perhaps, and then you start to wonder what kind of equipment, what kind of items are on this plane that may have caused this crash to be even worse. As far as the explosion goes, I mean, it was almost in a nosedive. Can we show the doorbell camera again? It's just incredible to see the angle in which this plane, as it's described, was coming down from the doorbell camera from about half mile away. There it is on the left of your screen. And you'll see the fireball, and it's a lot of people are saying, are we sure that's a plane? But it appears to be. And again, Northeast Philly Airport's less than 2 miles away.
And people saying, Jason, that they heard an explosion, they heard this happen, and then they looked up into the sky. People, reaching out to us on the phone, via email. There you see it again, just crashing down, coming out of the sky out of nowhere, and then that huge fireball. People say they felt the ground shake. Certainly a scary and frightening situation. I mean, this is the ring cam video that we've been showing you this evening, and can you imagine seeing this from your front door and wondering what in the world is happening?
Well, especially when you think about what just happened in Washington, D.C., and a mid-air collision, and a lot of people saying, wait, what in the world is going on? Fred Teesey, former pilot, aviation attorney, joins us now on the phone. And Fred, you've flown this airport many times. What can you just tell us about the type of aircrafts that fly in and out of Northeast Philly Airport?
Yeah, so no problem. Thanks for having me on, guys. So I actually used to be based at Northeast Philly Airport years ago when I first came back from New York. My airplane was up at Northeast Philly Airport, so I've flown in and out of there countless times. It's an interesting airport. The biggest runway there, it kind of goes up. It runs from like almost parallel to the boulevard, up kind of around Red Lion Road, And there's the first thing I can say about Northeast Philly Airport is that, you know, it's surrounded by, you know, the urban part of Philadelphia. So it's not like Millville where you take off and the whole world's a kind of an off-field landing strip. So, you know, Northeast Philly is, I don't want to say dicey, but if you're a single-engine airplane and you lose your engine in Northeast Philly, you're descending. You know, the question is, where are you going to descend?
Right, and that makes it so much more dangerous because of the location of this airport and what can happen, which is what we're looking at right now.
Right. It is what we're looking at right now. It's really hard to tell what's going on. I've seen some of those ring cameras. I saw one on your Instagram account, and so that whatever it was moving at a high rate of speed.
Yeah, I was going to say, what do you make of the angle, the what appears to be a nosedive or what have you? What can cause a plane to fall out of the sky like that?
Okay, well, a number of things. And so, you know, I don't have any problem with speculating, but before I do that, the first thing you want to look at is the weather. And so right now, right before I came on with you guys, I looked at the weather at Northeast Philadelphia. It's what they call 700 overcast, which means it's that when you take off, once you get up 700 feet above the ground, you are in the clouds. The other thing that caught my attention is that in aviation, we use centigrade, and it's 10 degrees centigrade. And the reason we use centigrade, not one of the reasons, is that because as you go up, for every 1,000 feet that you go up, you lose 2 degrees of centigrade, and 0 centigrade is freezing. So now that tells me that the clouds start at 700 feet on the way up, and the ice starts to form at 5,000 feet, right? 10 degrees to 5,000 feet. And so back to the answer to your question, I have no idea what happened here, but one of the things that can cause an airplane to have a problem like that is icing, and particularly this type of weather where you have rain that's falling, and depending on what the atmospheric conditions are above, a lot of times that rain will fall and the water itself will get below freezing, and then it's just looking for something, and when it hits an airplane wing, the water droplets splatter and they immediately freeze. It's called freezing rain, and it is an absolute nightmare for anything other than a jet. I mean, it's just the weather. So to answer your question, the first thing that I'd be looking at with this is the weather, because that's the kind of accident that would be consistent with either airframe icing. You know, it's just not an engine failure. You know, people don't understand this. When engines fail, the airplane, you know, airplanes will keep going. I mean, they just need to move through the air to create lift. I mean, they'll definitely go. They won't go indefinitely. At some point, they'll come back down to Earth, but not like that.
Right. That was like a nosedive to the ground.
Yeah.
It was.
And Fred, witnesses are reporting just an immense smell of gas, of fuel. And, you know, with this possibly being a medical flight, what kind of equipment does a medical flight carry? Oxygen tanks, things that could explode? That's kind of my question.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it depends. So the question, that raises two questions if it's a medical flight. First of all, was this a rotary wing aircraft, like i.e. a helicopter, or was it a fixed wing aircraft? They do carry oxygen. I'd be curious what kind of smell that the bystanders are smelling. The more sophisticated stuff burns jet fuel. So the helicopters, the sophisticated helicopters, the medevac helicopters that you see, they burn jet fuel. You know, the bigger airplanes, the medevac airplanes. I mean, I knew people used to fly medevac on Learjets, which is a private jet that, you know, they can use for medevac. So, and those are the kind of airplanes that fly in and out of Northeast Philly. Northeast Philly has, you know, a lot of medevac flights go in and out of there because it's easier for a lot of different reasons, not the least of which is that you're not, you know, getting in and out of Philly International is a little bit more difficult on the general aviation side. Not impossible, but a lot more difficult, whereas Northeast Philly, you gas and go.
So stay with us, Fred, as we try to recap what exactly is going on. And we're showing you some new video. But about an hour and a half ago, reports of a small plane crashing in Northeast Philly, right around the Roosevelt Mall area. Several fires burning. And Dawn, you had mentioned the amount of people on that plane.
Right. We're told from top police officials, our Steve Keeley telling us that there were 6 people on the plane, 2 doctors, 2 pilots, a patient, and a family member. So that is the presumption that it was some kind of medical transport. Governor Josh Shapiro just making a statement on X saying, quote, "I've spoken with the Philadelphia mayor and my team is in communication with Philadelphia Police, with the Philadelphia Office of Emergency Management and the Philadelphia Fire Department. We are offering all Commonwealth resources as they respond to the small private plane crash in Northeast Philly. We'll continue to provide updates as more information becomes available." So Governor Josh Shapiro, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, has been briefed on what's happening, offering all resources to the Philadelphia area as police, fire, and EMS try to get a handle on this very chaotic scene. But again, as Steve first reported, it seems like this was a medical transport flight with patients and doctors and pilots on board crashing into the streets of Philadelphia.
And we're looking into where that plane was headed, and obviously it's going to be a while before we find out who was on that plane. But Fred Tisi joins us, a former Navy pilot, and Fred, you just joined us to talk about that midair collision in D.C., and now here we are talking about this in Northeast Philly. So when you're talking about 6 people in a medical type flight, possibly a Learjet 55, this plane could have been headed anywhere. You had mentioned the importance of de-icing, and that possibly being just speculating here, but obviously Northeast Philadelphia Airport, and that's all part of the pre-flight process, correct?
It would be. And so a couple things. So now it's interesting how fluid this kind of stuff is. So we now know that the aircraft was departing Northeast Philly. So it means that tells me it would have been full of fuel. And that's why you're seeing an accident on the ground. You're seeing witnesses on the ground saying that the airplane was full of fuel. Could it be a Lear? That would be consistent with the kind of airplane that comes in and out of there. It could have been a King Air, which is a twin-engine turboprop. It could have been any one of a dozen airplanes. I mean, I could rattle off dozens of airplanes that it could be. To answer your question, you cannot take off with ice on the wings. Now, as I said earlier, the ground temperature is 10 degrees centigrade, which is, what's that, like roughly close to the 50s. So being iced up on the ground before we took off, that's not going to be an issue. So the question is whether or not that aircraft, how long has it been since it took off? Did it climb into icing conditions? Depending on the type of aircraft it is, the first thing you do when you get into ice, let's say it is a light jet, you get into ice with that thing, you just pull the nose up, you just keep going. Because sooner or later, you get up where the air is so cold that the water's not going to form on the wings. Now, if it's a Navajo, which is a twin-engine, unpressurized airplane that's used for medical transport, that's a piston-powered airplane, that airplane gets into ice, that's a whole different kind of kettle of fish. So, I mean, there's a million different things that go into this. I just can't keep getting away from the fact that the way the airplane came down, that just tells me one of the 2 things. It could have been a structural issue. Airplanes don't come down that fast. I mean, they just don't. Yeah. Unless there's been a structural issue. I mean, there's.
And what kind of structural issue would you think it could possibly be? What could we be looking at?
Well, believe it or not, what people don't realize is that the pilot can, on either a 747 or the smallest Piper Cub, a pilot can pull the wings off of an airplane, and by yanking back. And so what happens is that we see this a lot, or even the tail. A pilot, I don't know anything about the pilots flying this airplane, but a pilot who is not well versed in flying an airplane on instruments gets into rough weather, they panic or they over control, and they literally can overstress the aircraft. And then that's the kind of, again, I have no idea if that's what happened here, but I'm telling you all the different things.
It's not a hobby. It's your empire.
that's less likely, and then actually do something that would either overstress the tail or overstress one of the wings. You see this a lot in these high-performance light single turboprop and light single aircraft that they build, but usually that's an accident that happens to people that are at 21,000 feet and they get too close to a thunderstorm and they pull the wings off the airplane. So,
what about visibility, Fred? Like, would that have been an issue as well?
Well, the answer is to a professionally trained crew in a sophisticated piece of equipment, no. All right, so that gets back to what I was saying earlier, that 700 feet, once you go at 700 feet overcast, once you go through 700 feet in the climb, that's it. I mean, I've been in weather so bad that I can't see the tips of the wings of my airplane like that. And you have no visibility. And so you fly the airplane solely by reference to the instruments that are on the airplane. They could have had an instrument failure that didn't allow the pilots to keep the airplane upright in zero visibility conditions. So it could have been that. I mean, a lot of these airplanes today, like my airplane, all that stuff's kind of computer driven. In the old days, you literally had vacuum pumps that spun gyros that you used to keep the airplane upright in the clouds. So, could there have been an instrumentation failure that ended up being overstressing the airplane? Who knows? Could there have been icing that resulted in a stall in an effort to try and get out of that, overstress the airplane? I mean, it could be a million different things. I mean, I'd love to know. I think the biggest piece of the puzzle that I'd like to get my hands on right now is what type of airplane.
And we'll go from there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Go from there.
We're talking to Fred Tisi, a former Navy pilot, an aviation attorney, and many other things. Obviously, an expert in aviation. But there's two stories going on here. There's the plane crash that caused what happened in the sky, and then there's the search and rescue efforts for anybody on the ground in Northeast Philly, at that Roosevelt Mall, at any of those homes in the area that may have been hurt. I think it's probably safe to assume the worst for the folks on the plane. But we have no word yet on anybody on the ground who may have been hurt or worse in this disaster. There are, again, row homes here, stores, people driving, innocent. Again, this is right at rush hour. This happened about 6 o'clock, somewhere around there. And this is a video by Steve Keeley. And just look at the debris field. I mean, that looks like just a terrible scene right after the plane crash, and you saw the fireball from a distance. This is up close. Several gas-fueled fires underground. So,
and pieces of the plane scattered
everywhere.
all over. They're on fire. Homes are on fire. Cars are on fire. I mean, it looks like a war zone out there.
It does.
It's very chaotic. It's frightening. We don't know the extent of any injuries on the ground right now. We're still trying to get that information. And as we had reported, we believe there were 6 people on that plane when it just took a nosedive out of the sky for reasons we're still trying to figure out.
So a massive response, and there you can see some firefighters. This is as close as our live camera can get. Now we've got PECO crews there, so you're going to have gas and electrical workers there trying to probably shut off all of it in the area just as a precaution to get the fires out. That video up in the top left is from about 45 minutes ago, and at that moment there was still smoke in the sky. Steve was having a hard time breathing, and a lot of folks in this neighborhood were having a hard time breathing, smelling jet fuel, smelling gas, and obviously several fires burning in scattered areas, just chaos. Exactly what you'd think a terrible plane crash would look like in a very dense area. Unfortunately, that's what we're seeing in Northeast Philly. And we bring in Fred once again to talk about this plane crash, and just a terrible coincidence here, Fred. When you talk about a mid-air collision and then a plane that virtually just fell out of the sky.
All right, so a couple things it's coming. So it's funny. So now you guys can't report on this, but I'm telling you some of the things that I'm saying, which gets back to kind of the speculation that I was saying earlier. There was a Lear 55 that operates as MTS, Medical Transport Services, that was scheduled to depart Northeast Philly, I think for Springfield, I want to say Springfield, Illinois. So if you go to Flightaware.com, you can see scheduled departures from Northeast Philly. And that aircraft, a Lear 55, was scheduled to depart. And so that airplane would have a bunch of jet fuel on it. Some of the, all the aviation rumors are starting to swirl around about an instrumentation loss, which is something we had talked about earlier. Who knows if that is what it was? But with a Lear 55, if that's what the airplane is, I mean, a Lear 55 is a very sophisticated airplane. A Lear 55 and a highly trained crew, something kind of went catastrophically wrong.
And so you're saying, based on the FlightAware data that you've looked up, that Lear 55 was taking off Northeast Philly Airport when?
It was scheduled at 6:06 p.m.
And that's
see here for a second.
Right, and that's shortly thereafter
that's right about
is
the time
when this all happened. And Fred, you also talked about, so it would also be completely fueled up, making this crash with fuel everywhere, which people are reporting smelling jet engine fuel. We've seen all these fires.
All right, so let's look and see here. So that airplane may have made. So we have scheduled departures out of Philly. Looking at FlightAware, right? So then there was another one, Canada Regional Jet, going to South Bend, Indiana. That airplane looks like it got where it was going. One of these Lears looks like it's still up going where it's supposed to. So it's really hard to tell, kind of, what's going on. I mean, it's some people are saying it was a Lear. Some people are saying it was a Canada Regional Jet. So who knows?
Okay. Fred TC, thank you for joining us, giving us your expertise, and I appreciate what you very much helped us try to understand what happened here. So thanks for your time. We're going to get back to Steve Keeley on the ground. It's been a while since we've talked to Steve, probably at least 20 minutes or so, as he has tried to get to a safe place, and then his reporter instincts kicking in, and he's going to need to sort of tell us what he's seeing, and he'll be joining us in just a moment.
And this all happening shortly after 6 o'clock tonight at Bustleton and Cottman, the Roosevelt Mall. A small plane crashing into Northeast Philadelphia. People seeing a plane taking a nosedive in the sky, and then you see on the left-hand screen there just a huge ball of fire. Emergency crews, dozens and dozens, all available. Fire, police, EMS crews responding to the scene, which has been very chaotic. As we've talked to our Steve Keeley, he's having trouble breathing. He's trying to report the story. Governor Josh Shapiro also making a statement on X saying that he's going to make all available resources available to the city of Philadelphia, offering the mayor, the fire department, the police department, and the Office of Emergency Management any possible help that they could need in handling this huge crisis in Philadelphia that we've been dealing with for about an hour and a half or so.
Yeah, the AP reporting that, as we just heard from Fred, saying that this flight took off at 6:06, disappeared from radar about 30 seconds after climbing to an altitude of 1,600 feet. And at least that's what this particular flight did. It's only 3 miles from the airport. So however high a plane like that can get in just 3 miles and just a few minutes after takeoff is what we're talking about here. And at some point, this plane, which had been reported to be a Lear 55 medical jet with 6 people on board, 2 doctors, 2 pilots, and a patient and a family member, took off around 6:06, and something awful happened after that, and this is basically the result.
Right, and Fred TC talking to us about that this is a very sophisticated aircraft, and it had a highly trained crew on board, so saying that, something like this is hard to explain.
Yeah. This is a new live look on the right side. That's live. It's a gas station here. It looks like Cottman Food Market right there, one of the strip malls in the area. You still see smoke and sort of a haze in the air. Steve Keeley, can you hear us?
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so you're not going to believe this debris field keeps getting wider. So I parked at the McDonald's, as I told you earlier, Jason, at the Boulevard and Cottman Avenue, which is across the boulevard from the plane crash site. 2 officers tell me here is an air tank from the airplane, and the air tank has a number 10 on it with jet rescue label on it. So I said how it was a medical jet with 2 doctors, 2 pilots, a patient, and a family member, a commander had told me, and that was confirmed by another officer. This would be on a medical plane, an air tank, an oxygen tank that is right on the corner where the McDonald's is, across all 12 lanes of Cotman Avenue, and that's how big the debris field is. I just talked to Sergeant Eric Grip. I said, any estimated time of arrival on the police news conference? He says, we might have to keep moving it back because we keep finding stuff from the plane. So I'm standing here with this air tank now that hasn't been roped off yet, and I don't know if it was kicked down here or it's down. It's across all 12 lanes of the boulevard. It may have been hit by vehicles and ended up here. But this, they keep moving the scene back. They have closed the boulevard. It was not closed right after this when I was on scene. But this air tank is here, and I'll get a picture in so you can see it. And it's just shocking how much they keep finding. Now, it's dark out, it's been raining, and there's been smoke billowing all the time. I just walked 2 miles to get around everything safely to get to where they're going to have the media news conference, which is at a gas station across the 12 lanes of Boulevard. But they keep finding things, so they may move the media back before they start talking. So I'm going to head back over there. I'll get you a picture where this air tank is. It looks like Philly police are coming over just to secure that now. But what an awful scene this is. And still, I have not gotten any information on potential victims on the ground. This was a crowded mall. It was a packed Cotman Avenue waiting for the traffic lights at the boulevard. And I know firsthand because I was in it moments before and moments after on both sides. So there's your update. I'm going to go back over the scene. I'll get right back to you. And we expect to hear from, I know Police Commissioner Kevin Bethel just arrived. We'll hear from police and we'll learn what they know at this early juncture still. As you hear sirens, fire department, ambulances leaving, and it's also a gruesome scene. I was warned at one point. Everybody was moving me back to be for our safety and other things. It's just awful scene, and the police and the fire department doesn't even know the extent of everything that happened just yet because Cotman Avenue is one of the busiest streets in Philadelphia, along with Roosevelt Boulevard, at the busiest time of day, evening rush hour on a Friday.
All right, Steve Keeley, get to safety, and as soon as you have more information, we will check back in with you. You are doing an awesome job out there.
And I was going to ask Steve about injuries. He obviously has no information on that, but I mean, objective one for first responders is to find anybody on the ground who needs medical attention. And I don't know if you can hear me, Steve, but have you seen any patients being loaded onto gurneys, people being scooped up by ambulance or police officers in need of medical attention, anything like that? Okay, I think he took off. It's very fluid for him.
Right.
We're trying to get him back on the phone when we do that, we can. But as you mentioned earlier, Dawn, Governor Josh Shapiro is the one who really helped shed some light on this plane, the occupants, the 6 people on board a medical flight. The governor also saying that the plane crashed about 30 seconds after it took off, leading to this scene that we see here. Right near Roosevelt Mall in the parking lot, into stores, into homes, fire crews trying to put out those fires. And in these 2 live shots, the one on the right is live. I believe the one on the left is not. But there may very well still be fires burning as crews try to shut off gas lines that are underground that were disturbed by this plane that fell from the sky.
Right. This, if you're just joining us right now, this all happened shortly after 6 o'clock tonight. We're hearing that a Lear 55 with 6 people on board, 2 patients, or I should say 2 doctors, 2 pilots, a patient, and a family member on this plane that just took a nosedive into the street. We're told that Roosevelt Boulevard from Steve Keeley is currently closed. He's hearing from top police officials. He's been in the thick of this all night long. We're hearing that it is a gruesome scene. He's been warned it's just awful. We don't know the extent of any injuries on the ground just yet. He is waiting to hear more from police. They're setting up a command center, so we don't know the extent of any potential victims on the ground. But you know, as you look at this video, you can see the massive response. The video on the left showing the fire burning after this plane crashed into the ground. And I thought it was interesting, as Steve pointed out, Jason, that where he was at this gas station across 12 lanes of Cotman Avenue, revenue that they found an air tank, an oxygen tank with jet rescue on it, presumably medical equipment that was on that plane that somehow ended up, whether it was hit by a car or that's, flying through the sky, landed in this gas station parking lot.
Yeah, and I think what is just blowing people away is just the idea of the angle that this plane came down. I mean, almost straight from the sky. And there are several other videos on social media as well that we will share with you when we can, but that just show different angles of just how this plane fell from the sky 30 seconds after takeoff, reportedly by the governor. And then the fireball so bright that even this camera shot on the left from the Ring doorbell and many others, just you lose sight of everything. That's how quickly and how bright it happened. The debris field, they haven't even been able to cordon it all off yet because Steve is walking around in what may be evidence. And you think about what the job the NTSB is going to have here, and they're already spread thin enough in the Potomac. From a mid-air crash 2 days ago. And now they're going to have to respond to this scene in a very, very busy section of Philadelphia, maybe the busiest outside Center City and some other areas, but Northeast Philly and the Boulevard and Cottman, and now you're talking about tanks from a plane that just crashed. But again, objective one, priority one, how is everybody doing on the ground?
Right.
Some of the folks in their row homes, in their cars, in restaurants, in some of those
Right, this was rush
businesses.
hour. People were, it's a Friday night, it's rush hour. People were headed home from work. They might have been headed out for the evening, and this happened. And Fred Teesey was talking about could be potentially icing on the plane or whatever. So let's head over to Drew Anderson. Drew, you can talk a little bit about the weather conditions when this happened and potentially what the pilots were up against.
So here's what I'm doing. I've been piecing together all the data that's coming into our newsroom. So you guys were mentioning how the plane potentially crashed about 30 seconds off of takeoff. So I went to FlightAware and was looking up some of the information that Learjet we were talking about, and the estimates are it only got about a half a mile off the ground. So from that information, we wanted to see, okay, is it icy at that level up in the sky? Because it's pretty mild when you step outside right now, and ice as it collects on wings can change pretty much the way a plane is designed to fly, such that it can't maintain its altitude and it comes down because it's just can't handle that extra weight on the wings. From what I see from the weather data, as I was looking in the upper atmosphere, it is not icy right now a half a mile off the ground. You have to go about a mile or more off the ground before you're going to get temperatures below freezing. So from what I can see from the information coming in terms of the max height that the plane got versus what temperatures would be at that level, it does not look like ice is a factor that would have played a role in any whatsoever. But again, we're still waiting to get more information in to confirm those things. But from what I see, it's mild air where the plane made it and temperatures were above freezing. And when I'm looking right now on the live picture of our Philadelphia Skycam city line and just kind of look at the city sky, the clouds are really low. So the plane for sure would have been in visibility that would not have been existent. They would just been in clouds, not able to see. So that's something to keep in mind. But from what you guys were saying, I could just say ice would not have played a factor from the weather data that I'm seeing coming in at the Fox 29 Weather Authority Weather Center.
Okay, Drew, thanks. We just got some breaking details. We have a statement from the FAA, and I'll just read it to you in its entirety. A Learjet 55 crashed around 6:30 p.m. local time on Friday, January 31st, after departing from Northeast Philadelphia Airport. 2 people were on board. The plane was en route to Springfield Branson National Airport in Missouri. The FAA and NTSB will investigate. The NTSB will lead the investigation and will provide all updates. So the governor earlier had said 6 people were on board. The FAA now saying 2 people were on board. But now, Dawn, we know that this plane that took off from Northeast Philly Airport was headed to Missouri, Springfield Branson National Airport. So that's what we can tell you from the FAA, an official statement. And now the NTSB will be making its way up. And again, it's just still so shocking that this happened in Northeast Philly, and now again a rescue effort underway for the folks on the ground who may have been hurt by this terrible disaster.
Right, and the FAA is saying, of course, that this information is preliminary. It is subject to change as we learn more information. Governor Josh Shapiro also in contact with the mayor of Philadelphia, with the police chief, with the fire chief, trying to offer any and all assistance he can as the city tries to deal with this crisis, with this tragedy. As you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, this is what happened. You can see that fireball after this plane, this Lear 55, just took a nosedive out of the sky, and it took off about 6:30 tonight, and 30 seconds later was crashing into the Philadelphia streets. And we have learned, as you mentioned, Jason, initially we thought there were 6 people on board, but according to the FAA, it's now saying that 2 people were on board that plane.
Steve Keeley, I don't know if you can pull up Steve Keeley's latest tweet, but he has a picture of the oxygen tank, the medical oxygen tank that he was describing to us on the air. He is right on the boulevard somewhere just outside the Roosevelt Mall, and he said across the 12 lanes of the boulevard, he saw a jet rescue oxygen tank on the side of the road, right next to a McDonald's. And as soon as we will bring you that when we can. It's just an incredible debris scene and a debris field. Steve Keeley also, there it is. That's what Steve saw. I think that's on a sidewalk, right outside the boulevard.
Right.
Not sure if it was hit by cars or just incredible that is intact.
Yeah, he said, Steve tweeting that the oxygen tank from the jet was outside the McDonald's at Cottman Avenue and Roosevelt Boulevard. That's about a quarter mile at least from where Steve Keeley was earlier when he was reporting near those fires. Right. So that is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and I'm just estimating if that's a quarter mile away, you got to think the debris field is even larger than that, maybe a half a mile at least. But one police commander telling Steve there's pieces everywhere. And when you talk about a plane that falls out of the sky, it's not a surprise at just how widespread the debris field is there. And now we turn our attention to the ground and the folks there and the innocent people on the ground driving and shopping and eating. And it's just way too soon to tell. And we'll certainly be checking in with hospitals, checking in with the community there to try to figure out if everybody's okay on the ground.
Right, and Philadelphia Council member Mike Driscoll issuing a release on the impact of the crash in Northeast Philadelphia. He is the chair of the Transportation and Utilities Committee, and he says that his heart is so heavy, this is a quote, "As we continue to learn more about this tragic plane crash in Northeast Philly, we are in direct communication with our emergency response teams to monitor the ongoing impact to the immediate and surrounding area. This is an active emergency response situation, sadly, with reported mass casualties." This is coming from City Councilman Mike Driscoll. Right now, our focus is on the needs of our first responders on the ground, as well as the individuals and families impacted by this tragedy. They're obviously asking people to avoid the area, and their prayers are with everyone right now. So just a really horrific scene, a horrific situation after this plane crashed at Roosevelt and Cottman just after 6:30 tonight, shortly after taking off from the airport in Northeast Philadelphia.
About 30 seconds. And again, a Learjet 55, and I don't know if our staff can just put up a Learjet 55 picture when you can, just to show the folks what it looks like. It's got about 4 windows, twin engine jet. It was headed to Missouri, so it had just been filled up with fuel. 2 people on board, according to the FAA. It was before 6:30 when it crashed. 30 seconds after takeoff, something terrible happened in the sky, and we won't even begin to try to figure out what happened there. It's just when you see the angle and the ferocious angle in which this plane crashed, it's no surprise that the debris field could be as wide-ranging as a half a mile. And, you know, I'm sure folks may come across some of that debris that needs to be preserved and not touched.
Right, and we were talking to Fred Teesey earlier in the evening. He's a former Navy pilot and also an aviation expert, and he was saying that angle, Jason, the fact that it came down at that angle and it came down so fast that something had to be terribly, terribly wrong.
Well, it came down so fast that people are questioning whether that was even a plane. I mean, because people think it was a missile, and from far away it certainly looks like it, but now we have confirmation that it was a plane. And so I know we have a Learjet pulled up. It's just an example of one, but it's in the computer. I think Drew pulled it up for us. But it can seat probably at least 10 people, if not more. And a lot of times these flights are used for medical purposes. Not sure if we don't have confirmation this was a medical flight, not according to the FAA.
Right, but we do know that Jet Rescue, which was written on that air tank that Steve showed us a picture of, is an air ambulance company. So we do know, there's that, oxygen tank on a Philadelphia street in the area in this debris field. So
and Jet Rescue describes itself as an air ambulance fleet, and they have 10 medical jets and 1 helicopter, according to their website. And so they have 1 Learjet 60. And they have 2 Learjet 55s, and that's what this is here, according to the